It's now 10 o'clock. We are going to wait for 3 minutes because we are seeing that a lot of people are entering the room right now, and we will start then in 3 minutes, if that's okay for you.
Rosina, and we'll start recording.
We will be starting right now. So good morning, everybody. I guess the hour is quite different in different parts of the world, as we were expecting people from very different places. We have a list of attendees here, and we have people from Canada, from Tunis, from different parts of Europe, and from many other areas, Gibraltar, and so on. So we are very glad to have you here on board and with interest in this webinar, which forms part of a series of webinars that we are organizing in the frame of the InSPIRES project. Let me introduce ourselves. We are Laura, we are at the Living Lab for Health in Sicaixa in Barcelona, and we will be moderating this webinar within the InSPIRES project. As you may know, the main goal of this European project is to build effective cooperation between science and society by supporting the growth of science shops and enabling the expansion of responsible participatory research and innovation in Europe and also abroad in order to tackle the key societal challenges that affect today our population. Today we are going to talk, as you know, about innovative methodologies for public engagement that can be used in science shops, but also in other environments where research and innovation is being carried out. And we have with us two speakers. Both of them are in institutions that are partners of the InSPIRES project today. Our first speaker is Dr. Franco Bagnoli. He is an associate professor of theoretical matter physics at the University of Florence and president of the Science Café Association in Florence. He participates as a local coordinator in European projects. So apart from InSPIRES, he is also in other projects like Recognition, Science Café, and Science Café 2.0. And Frank Kupper, he is an interdisciplinary researcher, performer, and facilitator. Currently, he works as assistant professor in science communication and public engagement at VU Amsterdam. He is in science and technology studies and also in arts and design perspectives. And he works on the conceptual and methodological innovation of public engagement processes to shape meaningful conversations at various science and society interfaces. At the moment, his institution is a partner of InSPIRES, but he is also the coordinator of another EU-funded project, which is called Rethink, that develops innovative ways to do open and reflexive science communication across Europe. So we are welcome, and thank you very much to our two speakers today for accepting giving us some light into innovative public engagement methodologies. Let's start then with Franco's presentation. He will briefly illustrate the role of science cafés and how they can be used within the context of science shops. His team has been doing it for a while already, and we will be inspired then by some projects where they have been applying this method in science shops. So the floor is yours, Franco.
Okay, I hope you can hear me, and I welcome everybody. And so I'll switch to the presentation, and then clearly I can ask any question that are present, that are coming. So our idea is to use what we know about in public engagement, especially using Science Café, in order to also apply this technique to science shops. I shall first present what the Science Café is, in case anybody is not aware of this methodology. And so you see the welcome here. The phrase here is that we try to move the conversation, a conference, in a place where is the public and not the experts that are at home. For instance, here you can see in the picture that one of our location, it is inside a market. So there are people essentially sitting in a restaurant, clearly not eating in this case, and they can assist the conference. In this case, it is mostly about food, and then discuss. And so actually the Science Café has been born in the 90s because Duncan Dallas, who was a journalist that were producing some public engagement transmission with BBC, was tired of this methodology that was essentially one way. So people spoke in the television or in the newspaper, and the attendees, the citizens, were not essentially allowed to discuss with the experts. And so it wanted to bring science out of academia, in his words, and inside life. And so in these pictures, you can see two different locations. One is in a public library, which is essentially not the best thing for a Science Café, but in Florence, we have difficulties in finding large pubs, and you see there are a lot of people here. The other one is in a cinema, because we are also exploiting movies and discussion about movies, not about the movies itself, but about the contents, for instance, coming from a documentary about bees or about plastics, in order to discuss social themes. And here is a small animations where you can see the idea of Science Café. As you see, science communication is not the difficulty, but the problem is how to interest people. And so let us clean everything up. And so put some pub tables and let people relax. Also, experts are on the same ground as the public. Here you can, if possible, you can have a beer or some other kind of drink. And there is a moderator. And so essentially, these are the ingredients of a Science Café. As you can see from the picture, the public is the real engine of a Science Café. The experts are the juries, but then there are questions that make pressure on the experts, and so science arises. It is filtered by a moderator, and then our coffee is produced in this way. And so, for instance, these are one of our last Science Café. You can see that I'm a moderator. The speaker is ending his presentation. You can see in the bottom that there was also a distant expert from another town. And then the public can put questions and so on.
Io vorrei forse fare una provocazione.
Okay, so how can one join Science Café and science shops? The idea is to switch from, say, a standard or Science Shop 1.0, way of conducting research. I mean, we receive a question, it can be a discussion, then we do the research, and finally there is a report and dissemination. We have a methodology in which people, so the citizen association and also the civil society is continuously involved in the production of the research itself. And this can be done in very different ways. For instance, using a forum discussion, streaming distance participation, and also using a citizen science. I mean, in some of our projects, the proposer themselves are the participant in the investigation. For instance, there is one about science perception, where those who asked us for performing this investigation are actually also conducting the investigation itself. And just for finishing, this is one of our pilot project, urban gardening. It was asked by an association here in Florence how to promote this idea of growing vegetables in cities. And then it was we organized the Science Café in order to advertise, in order to discuss and refine this question. And then we actually had been contacted by the municipality of Prato, which is a town nearby Florence. This municipality is assigning parcels of soil so for growing vegetables to elder people, and they were interested in what people used to grow, what are the benefits of the social and also economic work together, and so on. So we conducted an analysis using one of our students, not me because I'm a physicist, but people from the agriculture department. And finally, in next month, we are organizing another Science Café in order to present the results and then gather other questions, refine. For instance, we are extremely interested in the Chinese community in Prato, which used to grow a lot of vegetables, but which are not so easy to be contacted. And so that's all. And if there are questions, I'm here for answering them.
Thank you very much, Franco. We will postpone the questions for the end of the webinar. It's been really interesting. Let's now move to the second talk by Frank. He will talk about dialogue methodology developed in the context of another European project called Nano2All that aims to build responsiveness to the values, needs, and concerns of society in nanotechnology innovation. And Frank will share with us his experiences with the first two public engagement tools used in a dialogue process that they conducted within this European project. First of all, there were methodologies for prototyping and doing some scenario work. So at the end, the aim was to try to facilitate dialogue to imagine plausible futures that we want to see to solve certain problems that we may be facing at the present. And in the second part of the methodology, he explored with different stakeholders and with researchers and innovators how to design research and innovation to move towards the desirable futures that had been prototyped at the beginning. And maybe I didn't explain it exactly as it was, so I invite now Frank to better explain to us how he designed the process to facilitate these engagement methodologies. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosina, for the introduction. I expect that I will now get the opportunity to share my screen. So I'm waiting for that.
Yes. Leo, please.
Yes,
Can you...
now you have it. Now you have it.
Okay, so as Rosina mentioned in her introduction, I take a combined Science and Technology Studies and Art and Design Perspective on Public Engagement. And in this talk, I want to show you why I think that is important and what the benefits of such a perspective are, and how you can put this into practice in a workshop format to engage citizens in discussions about new scientific research or new technologies. So we all know that research and innovation potentially have a great impact on society, and that these impacts can be either positive or negative, can be either intended or unintended, and are not only about our health or well-being, but also about more fundamental issues related to how we organize our society and how we think about ourselves. And so because of all these impacts, it is argued by a lot of different scholars that there is a need to open up reflection and decision-making process to dialogue with different publics in society. So to listen to their perspectives, as Richard Owen says here in the quote I showed today. But we also know that these impacts and the development of research and innovation is complex, because a lot of developments are interrelated. They are not only about the safety or the effectiveness of a new development, but also about the social effects of this development. We also know that research and innovation impacts are uncertain because of the fact that our futures are open-ended. And finally, we know that the impacts of research and innovation are ambiguous, in the sense that they are open to interpretation. So how we understand and evaluate these impacts ultimately depends on our perspective, on the way we view the world, so on our values and worldviews. So this complexity, uncertainty, and ambiguity of societal impact is a challenge for opening up. And this challenge is the research question in my research group. So the research question is how to shape meaningful conversations about science in public. And here I've highlighted a few challenges in this question. So one thing is that we have to find a way to turn these abstract, uncertain futures of science and technology development into a conversation subject that is tangible, imaginable, conceivable for everybody in everyday conversation. Another challenge is that public engagement is often focused on the rational, more cognitive level of exchanging information, whereas we also know that a lot of these discussions are actually about much more deep-rooted values and concerns. So the question is how to make this conversation not only about rational arguments, but also about emotions, values, and feelings. And finally, opinions about science and technology, opinions of the public, are not entities that you can just collect. They don't reside in the heads of your audience, but they are constructed in the conversation itself. So in our work, we put the emphasis on just making and discovering meaning together, rather than on consulting or collecting opinions. Now I want to tell you a bit more about the context where we developed the public engagement tool that I'm presenting today. It was the Nano to All project, which is still running. It's a Horizon 2020 project aimed at building responsiveness in nanotechnology governance, responsiveness towards the needs, values, and concerns in society. As you can see on this map, we did dialogues with citizens and dialogues with different stakeholders in the nanotechnology governance arena in 6 different countries, 5 of them in Europe and 1 was Israel. And the project then moved on to a multi-stakeholder dialogue event in Brussels to integrate all these local findings into a roadmap for nanotechnology governance. So what I focus on in this talk is the first step of this multi-stakeholder dialogue methodology, and that is the dialogues that we did with citizens to articulate their perspectives and their needs and concerns. So we developed an innovative public engagement method for what I call participatory futuring. So thinking and talking about the future together with different stakeholders. So just a few highlights of this tool. It's a workshop format that takes 4 hours and can enable 6 to 15 participants. Maybe even a bit more depending on how many facilitators you have. It is a very open and flexible method, so it's actually it works both for experts and non-experts. We have applied it mainly with groups of citizens that did not have any particular relation to nanotechnology or nano research in their past. So the workshop is what the participants of the workshop do is that they develop scenarios about the future application of nanotechnology devices. And the scenario is not the end product, so it is, but it is mainly the means for those participants to engage in inquiry and dialogue. It is a stepwise process, which starts with prototyping, so the use of all kinds of craft materials to build a future object, and then moves on to storytelling, in order to put that future object into context and reflect on that context. And finally, a value reflection exercise to deepen out these narratives that are emerging and to reflect on what they mean to the participants. So a cornerstone of this methodology is scenario work. A scenario, probably a lot of people are familiar with scenario work. A scenario is a description of a hypothetical future that can then be used as an object for the discussion. Why is this important? Because scenarios help to make this future tangible and conceivable. They also facilitate thinking about the future because they can show different dilemmas. They can also show uncertainty. They relate developments to a context that is meaningful to a participant. So in that way, they connect the particular developments to the context and the perspective of the participants. And they also create a safe platform to interact and discuss, because the sensitivities that we have in the now towards different stakeholders or interests or perspectives can be put aside, and we can safely discuss the future. So what I want to do now is to give you an insight into the design of the workshop, so the script of the workshop. It was important for us not to impose a particular way of thinking, an expert-driven way of thinking about nanotechnology at the beginning of the workshop. So we decided to use a much more flexible way of giving people information to build on. So we developed a system of cards that contained information about nanotechnology, about potential benefits and concerns, and also cards about potential value dilemmas that could be involved, and cards about potential assumptions about the relationship between humans and technologies. So that was a loose way to get people, to help people to get to know the context. After that, we moved on to prototyping a future object. We presented people with a variety of craft materials and just gave them the freedom to experiment with it and to build something physical. And here you see a few examples of what that looks like. A nutritional controller that is patrolling a person's body and monitoring certain nutrition needs, but also a more futuristic, or even more futuristic devices that, for example, try to regulate emotions by means of a brain-computer interface. So very creative and also sometimes science fictional devices. And so after this phase of diverging to a lot of possible worlds and impacts, we wanted to converge to the meaning that those worlds would have for the participants. So we moved on to a storytelling exercise that was going to put this object into a specific context with a main character that experienced something and used the object for something. This was also a creative exercise where that was filled in by the participants. And we enriched this storytelling exercise by, again, giving them cards with what we call techno-moral elements. So with potential indirect societal impacts of this technology. After this, we kept on converging more by doing a reflection exercise to elicit the needs and concerns and values of the participants, and that's up with a plenary exercise to rank these needs, concerns, and values, and end the workshop with a, well, you could say, with a agenda for responsible innovation from the perspective of the citizens. Well, a few things about our findings. First of all, it was very interesting to see what we call the multiplicity of the image. So that we wanted to develop a methodology that could take this ambiguity of nanotechnology innovation into account. And indeed, we saw that by means of prototyping and storytelling, participants were able to interpret this ambiguity and to as a way to make a meaning and to share their meaning together. Another important finding was that this contextualization helped the participants to gain more insight into the complexity of the topic. As you could maybe also see from the examples of the prototypes, in the prototyping, many participants started out with a very with a problem solution thinking. So they focused on finding a solution for a problem, and then by means of the storytelling exercise, their thinking became more contextual, and they started to think about possible indirect effects on the person, on the society, etc. What was interesting is that the meaning that people eventually give to such a nanotechnology innovation is situated in broader framings that play an important role in the public debate. So socio-cultural framings or political framings that influence how people think about science and technology. And finally, there is a lot of critique on speculative ethics, because are these futuristic devices that I showed you ever going to be real? Is it important to discuss them if they are not going to be real? I think this method is an example of what we call explorative philosophy. So because of it helps the participants to put nanotechnology innovation in a context and then get it out of the context again to explore the values and then put that back into the context again. This helps them to make a meaning. And so in the end, it's not about the futuristic devices, but it's about the process of making meaning. So we produced an innovative tool for public engagement that is best to be used in the agenda setting process to articulate the citizen needs, concerns, and values. If you want more information about this tool, go to the Nano2All website, where you can find a complete description of the dialogue methodology if you want to try it yourself. Thank you for your attention. And I'm open for any questions.
So thank you, Frank. And now we have around 20 minutes for discussion. So the chat is open for questions. We invite you all to post them, and we will probably give you the word so you can ask them directly to the speakers, okay? Now we start with Sylvie's questions. Frank, she's asking if you can share the inspiration cards. Would that be possible?
Sharing the cards now or at a later moment?
As you wish. It may not be possible now, but maybe later is fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
And perhaps if you could talk about how these cards were developed.
Yeah, we developed. So there were different types of cards. There were technical information cards. There were impact cards, so highlighting different potential positive and negative impacts. There were value cards that showed what kind of value dilemmas or conflicts people could think about, and there were assumption cards that challenged different assumptions about, well, the relationship between humans and technology. For example, do you see technology as a neutral instrument to realize your goals, or do you see technology actually as something that infiltrates how we think, act, and do? So, so why did we use those cards? Because it was important for us to give these thoughts for time. We didn't influence their perspective too much, and to sort of know their about it. So it was a challenge for us to keep it specific and open at the same time. And so examples of these cards are part of the dialogue methodology that is in the Nano2All website, and I can also send you versions of these materials by email as well.
Thank you. I think Rosina had a question for you too.
Yes. We have been able to see different methodologies in this webinar, the Science Cafés, and also this scenario work that was done in Nano2All. And both of them can be used at research agenda setting, and Franco also explained that Science Cafés can be used all through the process. So my question is, when would you recommend our participants in this webinar to use one or the other methodology for research agenda setting, and whether you think this is related to the complexity of the problem we are trying to solve?
I can speak. I think, Frank, you have to unshare your screen. So clearly the Science Café approach is interesting, but it requires a lot of work. Clearly, here in Florence, we have a volunteer association whose participants are running this activity, and it is not paid by the project. It would be impossible to set up something like this because of a project. We started because we liked the idea of, say, popularization of science by means of an interactive tool. But actually, I found that a lot of people are quite content to participate and to be involved also in the co-design of projects and so on. Actually, when we were organizing this Science Shop 2.0 project, we organized the Science Café with people discussing with participants about what can be done in this project, and possible search and so on. So possible, I suggest to either to set up something like this, or to be in contact with other associations that already organize this kind of activities.
Thank you. And do you also use this methodology to co-design the participants' research tools?
Yes, sure. Not exactly me. I mean, I do this. For instance, I'm writing down a project, a public project like the ones in Horizon 2020 or something like this. I always try to organize at least some kind of focus group or Science Café or other in order to present the topics and discuss with people, and so anticipate what they can expect, and so also involve them in the co-design. But this has been done also by other collaborators, for instance, in the field of psychology, that are essentially requiring this kind of participation. So they found it very useful. And we are now being asked to organize these events also by other associations, like Elder People Association, that every summer ask us to illustrate the latest results in, say, aging techniques, or aging preventing techniques in a public engagement discussion. So actually, I found it quite rewarding, even though it is extremely heavy to be followed.
And now Helen Garrison has a question for Frank. She asks if you have tried this participatory scenario with other topics, but Helen, would you like to formulate your question?
Well, I think it's yes, true. I was just wondering whether you've tried the approach with other topics, and whether there are certain topics that would work best with, whether there's slightly controversial topics would work best. Just how it can be applied.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thanks for your question. We didn't try this particular tool with other topics. We did use similar tools or similar strategies like prototyping or storytelling or value reflections in other tools for other topics. We developed this tool specifically for topics that have a degree of complexity, uncertainty, and ambiguity, because then we feel it's necessary to facilitate thinking about it. Although I think that many science and technology topics have these qualities. It is a very open and flexible method because it's the structure of the method predominantly aims at helping the participants to make sense of their own thoughts in relation to the topic. So what I've seen in similar engagement tools that we developed is that because of this openness and flexibility, it tailors quite easily to either different audiences or different participant groups or different topics.
Hani has a question: how to bring the public input back to the researchers and other stakeholders. But Hani, could you please elaborate your question?
Do you hear me? Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
you hear me? Okay. Okay, I'm Hani. Well, I have, especially at this question, I do understand, thanks for the presentation, first of all. I do understand the empowerment of the citizens and the public engagement part, but I'm a partner in the Go Nano project. It's governing nanotechnology through societal engagement. And we try to get an uptake by researchers and also to use other stakeholders in this co-creation process. And I'm interested in, well, it's important to empower the public, but how do you feed it into discussions with other stakeholders? And
Yeah,
how is this uptake, and how is it being taken seriously?
I guess it's a question about the impact of public engagement in research and innovation.
I think, yeah, we had a lot of, well, there are a lot of projects about public engagement, but I think one of the next steps is how to get it into real change in behavior of people or different stakeholders, coming up with new products, coming up with products that have more use. How are you planning to work with this in the project, or is the project only about public engagement?
I can respond to that. Actually, Rosina mentioned it in the introduction, but I did not have time within the 15 minutes to go into that. This is what we try to do in the next phase of the project when we moved on to a multi-stakeholder dialogue about the same nanotechnology topics. So there we invited professional stakeholders from different categories like researchers, innovators, policymakers, and so on, media. And we also invited a representation of the citizens that were part of this prototyping workshop. So that was one thing that we did to transfer the message to this new group of stakeholders. Another thing that we did was that we made visualizations of the scenarios that were constructed by the citizen participants and started the multi-stakeholder dialogue with a reflection exercise on these visualizations. So we really, with a series of questions, we took them into an inquiry about what does this mean what do you think this means to the citizens, and what does that mean to you? And we used those reflections as a starting point for the rest of the discussion. But I do recognize what you say, that it's often very difficult, yet also very critical to, in the end, build the responsiveness of research and innovation stakeholders and actually broaden the reflection of scientists or innovators, and contributes to change in the way research is done. And it needs, what we discovered in these multi-stakeholder dialogues is that it needs extra facilitation. So you need to guide participants through these participatory scenarios to show in which way they are meaningful to researchers. Sometimes we got comments like, this is not feasible, or this is not realistic. This is too much sci-fi, or citizens don't know much about that technology. Yeah, so I personally I see those kind of comments as missing the point a bit, because it's not about the eventual scenarios, it's about the underlying concerns that people express when they talk about these scenarios. These concerns, they are legitimate, but indeed you need an extra participatory process to process that.
Thanks, Frank. Franco, would you like to add anything?
Well, for us, involvement of public is quite direct, since a lot of our activities are face-to-face. We have also some activities that are mediated through radio. We are running a radio transmission and by streaming our events. And since I see now a new question, how are you measuring in some way the impact of these activities? I can quickly speak about this. We are measuring, first of all, the fact that we still have people coming to our events is a way of measuring this. But another interesting thing is that if you go to cafescienza.it, which is our site, we have the video recording of all events, which are quite boring because there are 2 hours of discussion, so you couldn't imagine that anybody would like to see them. Actually, when we see the YouTube statistics, we see that we have a long tail of people that after years are watching the old videos. And so I think that one of the best thing to do is to video record, when possible, all activities and made them public. And they are appreciated, for instance, by students that go to search some question, they meet the video, and so after some 5 or 6 years, they still can profit of what you have done.
Thanks. And before going to Sarah's question, the next question, Rosina, would you like to add something about bringing the public input to the researchers and stakeholders?
Yes, I think, Hani, your question is very relevant. And I imagine that depending in the field you are working on, sometimes the public engagement can be seen as difficult to impact really into what the researchers are doing. For example, we are here today in a biomedical research center, and next door, just behind this wall here, we have researchers working, for example, in the vaccine against the HIV. And some of the research that is being done for the vaccine is very, very complex, of course, but also very technical. It's a deep debate with the public sometimes can be difficult when the complexity is happening mainly at scientific level. However, in this field of HIV, when we have a prototype and we want to move into clinical trials already, and we need volunteers to work in the development of this research, then the dialogue is very meaningful, because we need to develop information sheets for the volunteers. We need to explain how the procedure, how the protocol looks like. And here is where the public and especially the patients in this case can bring a lot of input, and they do already through a committee that we have created more than 10 years ago. And they are therefore there doing a very high impact in changing our protocols and our information sheets at this stage. But however, if we look at, for example, the prevention of HIV, which we could say that it's a problem, that it's complex at scientific level, but also at social level, then the engagement is even more meaningful or more impactful, and therefore it requires more effort into the engagement. For example, within these InSPIRES projects, we are bringing in some engagement methodologies regarding prevention of HIV, and one of our main findings here is that we have discovered that in the priorities of the scientific community, at least in the area where we work in Catalonia, there was one priority that the other stakeholders considered it to be very, very important and was not in the research agenda at all, which is stigma. And the community was telling us that one of the main obstacles for the prevention is stigma. So now we are making efforts with the Science Shop to make sure that Catalonia has a stigma in the research agenda, and we are constructing with methodologies a bit similar to what Franco explained, developing scenarios and seeing which projects should be carried out in the field of stigma. So we can see that depending on the complexity, and maybe this is what I was also asking before, depending on the complexity and where the complexity is, if it's more within the scientific field or if it's both in the scientific field and also at social level, then the public engagement required may be different, and also the impact that we will expect will be different. So I don't know if the answer, and as answering to the next question on evaluation, within InSPIRES, a tool for evaluation is also being developed, which is not ready yet, but of course the project will share it with everybody once it's finished. So just follow us on Twitter or through our website, and we will publish it as soon as we have.
And maybe Frank would like to say something else about how do you train the facilitators? Oh, we cannot hear you, Frank.
So the question was about how to train facilitators, I guess. Yeah, so this was really important in our project. Well, as you are perhaps aware of, the European projects are always collaboration projects where the work in the end is done by many different people in many different institutions. So we thought it was really important to have a solid training of the facilitators. So the work was carried out by 6 different science museums and science centers, and we invited the facilitators to a training in Amsterdam of multiple days, where we really took them through all the aspects of this tool. Both the nanotechnology and societal impact aspects, and also how to facilitate prototyping or storytelling exercises, how to deal with different types of participants, so also facilitation techniques, etc. So yes, I do think that professional facilitation skills are important when you use a format like this.
Thank you, Frank. And well, it's 4 minutes to 11. So with this last question, we will close this fruitful webinar. We hope that it has given you new tools on public engagement. And we would like to thank Frank Kupper and Franco Bagnoli for their collaboration and their excellent presentations. It's Global for the technical support, and of course to all of you for joining this webinar. Our opinion is really valued for us, and we have prepared a satisfaction survey which will be sent to you this morning by email, and we will be happy to have your feedback. So thank you all, and see you on our next webinar.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.